Hey guys, welcome back. We're on part 3 and page 42, 1996 by Gloria Naylor, and page 42. In early March, I noticed that the traffic pattern near my home had changed. To call anything traffic on that part of the island is really a stretch. Coffin Point Road dead ends at McTier Drive, and the only cars to come down that far were driven by the few people heading home on Salt Wine Drive. The Coffin Point plantation house at my house sat on the water. There was nothing beyond us. There was a small amount of traffic from the oyster factory further down McTier Drive, but it was only evident in the evenings when the trucks carrying all the day's work were leaving. On a busy day, I would sit in my study and see one car every 2 or 3 hours. In March, I was seeing 3 or 4 cars every hour, and it was always the same pattern. A car would come up Coffin Point Road, turn left on McTier Drive, cruise to the end, turn around, and drive back out. It was clear that the drivers were casing out my house. I had that same question with no clear answer. Why? I knew it wasn't the sheriff's office because the cars were clearly driven by civilians. It was also civilians who were following me into the post office and the hardware store. Many of them were young white males or females, ranked amateurs. After a while, I stopped caring about my surveillance was going on. It was simply making me angry and distracting me from my work. I called my agent in New York and told him what was going on. He gave me the name of a lawyer in Charleston who might help me stop this harassment. Peter Wills was very helpful. He said that whoever was behind this was doing something illegal and that I should start taking down the license plate numbers of the cars that I suspected. If I was down in the garden, I kept a paper and pen in my pocket. And when a car drove by in the usual pattern, I would run to the road and note the license plate. The only effect this had was to make the car speed up as I headed for the road. I started to wonder if in some crazy, convoluted way, Eunice was behind this as well. These could be friends of hers that she sent to harass me, but that didn't make any sense. There was something else as well that didn't make any sense. The many cars that kept coming and going on my road, most were driven by Jews. At first, I thought that this particular pattern was all in my mind. I saw no reason why members of the Jewish community would take the time to come to the far end of the island just to drive past my house. But as the license plate numbers grew and the faces in the cars grew, there was no denying this fact. Perhaps I wasn't from New York. It would have escaped my notice. But I grew up learning the differences between Hasidic Israel and American Jews. American Jews had been my teachers and mentors, and some of them were my friends. It was Jews in those cars, and for some reason they had developed an interest in me. My feelings about how much of this to reveal Peter Wills were mixed. Part of my hesitation was fear. To be branded an anti-Semite meant a slow death to my career in New York publishing circles. Jews may fight among each other, but when they felt their interests were threatened, most of them came together in a network of silent consensus that the problem must be rooted out, whatever the problem and whoever was causing it. Presidents and prime ministers had bowed to this type of pressure, so who was I to think that I could pit myself against it? I had only a handful of contacts. I also had a smaller fear that I would actually be spreading anti-Semitism if I spoke about what I knew. There were many people in this country who thought badly of Jews, regardless of what they did, and wouldn't I just be adding more fuel to the fire? But then there was a part of me, the greater part of me, that wanted this thing stopped. It was infuriating to think that any people, for any reason, felt that they had the right to harass and torment me when I had done nothing to them. I was on St. Helena growing tomatoes and writing a book, for God's sake. What was that a crime? After some thought, I decided to write a letter to Peter Wells detailing what I had observed. March 25th, 1996. Dear Peter, it was a pleasure meeting you last week, and I've given much thought to our conversation. I've attached a sheet with the license plate numbers of the cars that I'm certain are being used in my surveillance. I followed your advice and not gone to the police about this matter because I have no definite proof. But what I do have are my powers of observation, honed by over 17 years of being a writer, and they are pretty reliable. As far as I can determine, there are three levels behind this situation: private citizens, private security agency, or government participation. On the attached sheet, I have given you the times and places of the official cars that are following me. However, what I have not noted in my records are the numbers of private citizens involved in this whole business. As a pattern began to take shape, I realized that part of their purpose was to confuse the issue, and more importantly, to confuse me about what I am seeing. If I were to run to the sheriff's office with a list of license plates that included some of the most reputable members of Beaufort community, I would be tagged as a paranoid lunatic. If I were to state my observations that the private vehicles were almost always driven by Jewish Americans, they would label me as anti-Semite to boot. But it is happening, and this is the pattern. And I am always in the middle of a formation when I leave home, with cars in front of me and behind me, and with cars coming very fast toward me and turning on either side. Why? God knows. Whoever thought this up must have some sort of military training, contain the objective, or whatever. It's a pattern that plays itself out if I'm at home, in my car, or at a restaurant. I hope you find the attached notes to be useful. I've tried to be as clear as I can, and I'm trying extremely hard to remain calm. We'll speak after you receive this letter. Best, Gloria. Yuri Levine doesn't know what to do with the copy of Gloria Naylor's letter that's sitting on his desk. Be careful what you pray for was his first thought that came to mind. On one hand, it gave him what his cousin Barry was looking for, proof that the woman was an anti-Semite. On the other hand, it blew their operation right out of the water. He shakes his head as he looks at the list of license plate numbers. She's wrong about the private security agency, and a lot of the numbers are pure drivel. But how to explain the numbers she's gotten right on target and with the time and locations? Jesus, if Rabbi Geller sees this, he'll shit his pants. He's already jumpy enough about her running out to the road and taking notes. It's all Yuri can do to convince himself that the woman was a nut job and nothing could come of her suspicions. No one this what no one was this no this one wasn't crazy, just damn lucky. But what could she do with that luck? Nothing was the answer. Absolutely nothing. If she and that loser she'd hired in Charleston ran the plates, it wouldn't read back to the ADL. They didn't mark your motor vehicle records Jew, non-Jew, or alien. There would be names, wouldn't there? A list of Jewish names. So a Jew didn't have a right to take a Sunday drive to that part of the island, to go into a hardware store, to eat a fucking Dairy Queen ice cream cone. All of this only confirms why he's glad he works for the ADL. America was full of bigots who hated them. And the work he did was important because it wasn't always in your face bigotry. It could be the sneaky kind, the kind that this Naylor woman possessed. They watched her long enough and hard enough, other things would come to light. They would have to. The truth would always come out, but how much of this to give to Barry? He'd send the first page of the letter without the license plate addendum and see how that would hold. There are two telephone lines in Barry Levine's antique shop, one for the business he runs as a cover and one that is secure and for the National Security Agency. As he's dusting off his Tiffany lamp collection, the business phone rings. It's Yuri. Did you get the letter I sent you? I haven't heard back. was a piece of crap. Crap, it gives you what you're looking for. She blew our surveillance, and she blew yours as well. A woman is seeing Jews everywhere. You're telling me that doesn't show you that she's an anti-Semite? Yuri, she's being followed by Jews everywhere. She doesn't know that. The letter says she knows that. I'm telling you, she's guessing. And I'm telling you, if I pass along something like that to the home office, it'll be my ass on a plate. After all the trouble I went through to get it, this is my gratitude. How did you get it? Searching through the garbage cans? I'm not going to dignify that with an answer. We do quality work here, Barry. Quality work. I had that letter almost before her lawyer opened it. Barry is glad when Yuri hangs up. He was an insufferable ass, but that still leaves him with a dilemma. If he includes any reference to the letter in his report, Dick Simon might ask him to see a copy and then he's done for. But if he doesn't include it, it'll look like he's been sitting on his hands all this time. An alliance with the ADL had been major coup. All that manpower with no additional expenditures. And that's what he needs to crack this thing wide open, more manpower. The woman was getting help from somewhere, that was evident. And with the Code 3 surveillance, he could find out exactly where. Yes, that's how he would put it. It was impossible for her to know about the ADL surveillance without some sort of outside intelligence. And if they wanted to proceed with this thing, then they need more intelligence as well. You fight fire with fire, not with a teaspoon of water. And he would send along a copy of the letter, framed in his light. It only supported his contentions all along. But it wouldn't be a rapport that even hinted at, I told you so. No, it would be resolute. Just give me what I need and I'll deliver the goods. The words Code 3 have been reverberating through Dick Simon's head all day and he wants it to stop. He knows that Barry Levine's report was full enough shit to bury the Washington Monument. But he also knows if he stops surveillance now, it would be just as good as admitting failure, and he'd never failed at anything, anywhere, at any time. And if he was ever to fail, unthinkable as it was, it would be over something important. And this woman was not important. She sank so far below the radar screen it was a joke, invisible. That's what she is in the scheme of things, and that's what a good surveillance should be. And if the target spots the surveillance, then it means one of two things. The team was incompetent or the target had outside intelligence. And in a case like this, she was getting her information from somewhere. Not that Barry Levine and his cohorts weren't incompetent, it's just that she wasn't that smart. He turns into his computer, opens the second vault door with the password for 2:15 p.m. and pulls up her watch list file. He stares at the face smiling back at him. Who are you, Gloria Naylor? He thinks. Nobody. Living in a nowhere town on a nowhere island, and yet you've taken up half my day. And you're about to dip heavily into my budget because I'm putting a code 3 on your file. You're going to be watched, my dear. You've never been watched before. Barry Levine's code 3 on the Naylor woman makes him feel like a kid in a candy store with a blank check. 3 or 4 times a day, he has to tell himself to calm down and do it right. First, there has to be a proposal filed outlining the number of teams needed as well as an electronic support. Since she's on a 24/7, he calculates that he needs 3 teams for 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 teams for 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and 1 for 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Since she never leaves her house at night. And then there was all that manpower he could still draw from the ADL, especially now that the operatives could be paid. And he needs a field supervisor who could make at the moment decisions that he couldn't sitting up in Columbia. He'd pull in a good man, David Shane, for the job. David had been with the Mossad for 18 years before he retired, and left Israel to live in the United States. Some say that he's never really retired and was a Mossad operative in Arlington, Virginia. Barry didn't give a crap if he was or wasn't. He was the best man for the job, and what money couldn't buy, an appeal to the prestige of working for the NSA would. Now that he could go into her house, he decided how many bugs to place, see how many phone lines were there to tap. Did she have a fax machine? A computer? If so, he had a couple of young hackers he could put on 24/7 to take care of that. Oh, yes, and a homing device for the truck. In the house or out the house or around the house, she was going to be his. It was a glorious April. The weather was already reaching into the low 70s, and my azalea bushes were in full bloom. My garden was also prospering, and I finally listened to my neighbor's advice and used pepper spray to keep Eunice's cats at bay. Because of an insulation I'd used called Wallow Water, my tomatoes were coming in ahead of season. I only wish that my interior life was as pleasant as the weather. The drive-bys had slacked off, but the surveillance was continuing. When people are watching you, it takes away a bit of your life every time you're followed into a supermarket, hardware store, or a movie. There's nothing that you're hiding or keeping a secret, so there's nothing for them to find out except what you're doing with your day, with your life. And there was a continual feeling that my life was no longer mine. It belonged to strangers in dark glasses. It was invasion in its crudest form, and it robbed me of my sense of peace. It also robbed me of my privacy for reasons that were still hidden to me. And since I had always been a quiet and private person, it was especially hard. I didn't take it lying down. I fought back in the only way I knew how, by talking to friends about my situation, by going to that lawyer in Charleston to see if there was some legal redress for the problem, and above all, by trying to keep my life going as it had before. I still felt secure in my home and found myself spending more time there than I had before. In the day, I had my garden and my books. At night, I was on the internet talking to friends. And then I realized that they had even broken into that bit of my life. I was on my laptop making notations for my journal when a spoof box popped up on my screen. The window read, "Paging idle." I couldn't get it to disappear, and when I clicked on the button for answer, nothing happened. I had to shut down my computer to get rid of it. I booted it up again, went back into my WordPerfect program, and after a short while, there was another spoof box that was labeled Trouble. And the text in the window read, "Big trouble, we're gonna die." I tried to use the print screen key on my laptop to have proof of this window, but it didn't work. And the only way to get rid of this window was to turn off the laptop and reboot the system. I'm not a computer whiz. I knew the rudiments of how to use the system from owning computers over the years, but you didn't need to be an expert to understand that someone had hacked into my system. This fact distressed me more than the message, which I put down to the childish prank. But it also made me have second thoughts about whether or not the government was part of my surveillance. Wouldn't they be more professional than this? And how are they doing it anyway? My laptop wasn't part of a network of computers that someone could tap into, but someone, for some reason, was monitoring what I did on my laptop. Another invasion into my life, and if they were able to do this, and they were, what about my phone line, my fax machine? They were there, even cameras in my home? A lot of questions for which I had no answers. Possible scenarios kept playing around in my head. I turned off my laptop and went to bed, but I didn't go to sleep. I decided I was going to call the sheriff's office in the morning and report this. I wasn't naive enough to believe that they could offer a solution, but I wanted a record of what was happening. Perhaps this wasn't the government at all. Perhaps it was just civilians with the power to disrupt my life. And then heaven only knew how it might escalate. David Shane can't believe the mess he inherited from Barry Levine. There were people from the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Anti-Defamation League, and the National Security Agency all involved with following this woman. The DEA, the ADL, and the NSA, a whole alphabet soup of operatives, and falling all over each other. And now he was expected to untangle this mess and bring some sort of order to the operation. No wonder she blew the surveillance. It was full of amateurs. His first order of business was to get the Drug Enforcement Agency to back off. And that wasn't so hard because they were deciding to wrap up their investigation anyway. It'd come to a dead end. Now it was just a matter of what kind of alliance could be made from the operatives of the ADL and NSA. He doesn't want to disregard the ADL totally because their assistance helped to start the manpower needed for the 24/7 on this woman. And a lot of what was going on with her was just raw intelligence. Where she went, how long she stayed, who she talked to. This sort of thing required no expertise, just rotating teams of operatives. And with the phone tap, it became even easier. When she made any appointments over the phone, they could follow her there as well as be there waiting. You didn't need to be a rocket scientist, but you did need organization, and all organizations needed a head. And the problem with the Naylor surveillance so far has just been that no one at the helm, and everybody wanted a piece of the action. Everybody wanted to play I Spy, working for the Mossad for 18 years. Shane knew real spy work, was at its best when it was subtle. What he had here is overkill. He would need every hour of his expertise as a psych op officer to keep this operation alive and effective. He would need some of the operatives to back off gently while still being enthusiastic about the help they were offering. Looking around at the group gathered in Eunice Simon's living room, he realized it isn't going to be easy. The room is packed with operatives from the ADL and NSA, and each is arguing for their piece of the action. Each blames the other for the botched surveillance. They have managed to be on two different sides of the room, and Eunice is running between them, offering coffee and donuts. A mass of people and about 1,000 cats. David hates cats, and he keeps shifting his position on the sofa each time one of them rubs against his leg. He's a big man with a deep, booming voice that he uses now to get their attention. He tries to tell them that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past with the operation. This is a new day and a new administration. Things will be a lot more efficient now. First of all, they now have the manpower for a blanket surveillance. There is no place she can go or plan to go without their knowledge. There is no one she can talk to, fax, or email without them knowing about it. They can follow her on trains, planes, and definitely in that red truck. She is a woman alone, for God's sake. She has no organization behind her, has a few friends and no help. If she tries to get help, they'll know about it and plenty of time to divert it, or at least plan their next strategy. This whole operation is a walk in the park, and as long as they don't lose their heads. But someone must be helping, Rabbi Geller says, or how would she know that Jews are involved? She doesn't know anything, Eunice snaps. She's an anti-Semite. I've been saying that from the beginning. I have a question. Hillary raises her hand as if she's at school. What is it? David asks. If she knows about the surveillance, what good does it do to keep on with it? We keep on with it until we're told not to, David says. And even if she does know, what can she do about it? Her knowing might even be turned into an asset for us. He looks at the puzzled faces in the room. Just think about it, he continues. Every time you leave your home, you notice that a man in a gray coat is following you. Each time it's a different man, but the same gray coat, and he tugs at his lapel. After a while, there's no need for us to send the man in the gray coat because the target will see the gray coats everywhere she goes. And so who can she tell without seeming like a lunatic? No one. She's trapped in the world that she's entered, our world, and we can do anything with her that we want. So you're saying that we should send men in gray coats? Rabbi Geller asks. No, David replies. We send cars. At first, I thought the drive-bys had resumed. I would be sitting upstairs in my study off the bedroom, and a maroon and yellow truck would speed past my window, facing McTier Drive. I thought it strange that it would be moving so fast on that bumpy, unpaved road. Perhaps it was to keep me from getting the license plate. Each morning it would appear and race down the road. Ours was the quietest part of the island, and this truck didn't fit into the normal traffic pattern. It wasn't that disturbing, and it never made a repeat trip during the day. I began to notice other traffic patterns. It seemed strange. Whenever I left my home in my truck and headed down the Avenue of Oaks, a car would pull out of beside a road in front of me, and shortly another one would pull out and drive in back of me. The front car was always below the speed limit, so it slowed down my truck while the oncoming traffic seemed to be whipping by, well above the speed limit. The oncoming cars caused a little zing in my ears while the car in front of me kept hitting its brakes. It was a pattern that kept repeating itself. Zing, zing, brake lights, almost as if they were trying to hypnotize me. I would pass the slow car in front of me whenever I could, which would eliminate the blinking lights. But the zinging of oncoming traffic grew from a minor disturbance into a ringing pain in my ears. It made the thought of getting into my truck and heading for a town an ordeal. And I used to love driving that truck. What kind of people would do such a thing? What were they hoping to accomplish? The goal was to keep me closer to the house. It worked. I only drove when I absolutely had to, and I spent much more time with my books and laptop. One evening, on a whim, I decided to look into my system files. There was a function on my computer that allowed me to list all of my DOS files on one screen. When I pulled up the screen, I saw that besides my C files, there was a mystery B file listing. Files on this B drive were identical to those on the C drive, with the exception of a file labeled American, period, BTD, period. When I opened it, the file was encrypted. I copied it because it was proof that someone was hacking into my computer without my being on a network. Of all the things that had bothered me since the beginning of 1996, this was the worst. Those computer files held my work and above all my thoughts, and someone was helping themselves to them. Barry Levine knows he's going to have a call Dick Simon, but his hands tremble each time he reaches up for the phone. The Naylor woman had accessed one of the hacker's files and copied it onto a separate disk. It wasn't anything important, just a joke between hackers, but it could have been important. It might have been classified information. It might have been top secret information. It might have been anything except what it was, and that's how Simon would see it. This is a major glitch, the kind of mistake that cost someone his head. Since he was directing this operation, his head was the closest to the chopping block. He's been trying all morning to think of some way to avoid the inevitable. It would be useless to put all the blame on the hackers since he'd chosen them. He could bury it deep into the weekly report and hope that Simon didn't read it, but that's ludicrous because the man reads everything. No, best to make the call and then pack his bags. Dick Simon is in a surprisingly good mood this morning. The Senate Committee on Intelligence had approved the new budget, and he held a memo from his director praising him for his good job at the hearing a few months ago. These are the kind of days he lives for, days of accomplishment. The memo from his boss is a lifeline. It shows that his work is appreciated, that he is appreciated because he and his work are inseparable. In his mind, the bottom seems far away when things are turning in his life his way like this. He's wondering how long this mood will last. A whole day would be a gift. But then he takes the call from Barry Levine. As Levine chatters nervously, Simon can feel the bottom open up again. Wide and black and permanent. He doesn't know what is bothering him the most. The fact that Naylor found the file, the fact that Levine is an idiot, or the fact that his good mood has had a lifespan of only 20 goddamn minutes. His voice is steely and cold. Am I going to have to take this over this operation personally? No, Mr. Simon, that's not necessary. Tell me why. Why, sir? Yes, tell me why that's not necessary. Because you've done nothing but sit down there with your thumb up your ass since the beginning of this whole affair. If I may speak, sir, that's a bit unfair. You've turned up a simple surveillance into fiasco. A civilian now has a file that belongs to the National Security Agency. Civilian with no training in computer technology was able to access your files and steal information that belongs to this agency. And you allowed this to happen. Mr. Simon, there was really nothing on that file, but that file contained top secret material. That file could help bring this agency down. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mr. Simon, there was nothing on that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, I understand. Good. So tell me again why I shouldn't take over this operation personally. Tell me why I should do anything but wrap you in a brown paper and send you to Siberia. There is silence on the line. I'm waiting, Dick Simon says. I'd like another chance, sir. To do what? Screw up again? To do my job. I'll get back at you. Dick Simon sits at the desk and thinks. He brings his tinted fingers up to his chin and sighs. The matter isn't whether to punish Barry Levine for his incompetence, but how severely. Simon must also decide if he wants to take over coordinating the Naylor surveillance, but did he really want to spend one good second of his time doing it? The fact that she had accessed and stolen their file meant that she was getting her help from somewhere, and by this time they should have found out who or where. There was nowhere she could move without him knowing the specifics. Surely she was sitting there in St. Helena laughing at them. This nobody, this a deep flush from his collar and to his hairline. She wouldn't be laughing for long. He decides he will call the boys. The boys are young recruits who have graduated from high school on the NSA campus. They have been groomed in undercover work and are attending various colleges throughout the nation. They are used as informants in their schools now, but the semester is ending. Simon thinks they might enjoy a little romp for the summer season. Once he had them in place, he would take over Levine's job of coordinating the surveillance. He'd leave David Shane as the field captain. Shane was a good man. Now that he wouldn't have Levine as a stone around his neck, he would probably do a better job. As for Levine, he could just hang in the wind for a while. Let him agonize over his eventual fate that would be part of his punishment. Boys came down in full force. There were only 4 of them, Paolo, Hallam, Ricky, and Chi. But they seemed like much more as they moved randomly around Eunice's living room. At first sight, they looked like all other teenage boys with knee-length pants, oversized t-shirts, and baseball caps. But their skin is pale from a lack of sun because these are the geeks from their various schools. All are considered computer nerds as they spend every minute of their free time with their laptops or video games. It's exactly what they're doing now as they wait for David Shane to gain control of the meeting. The group is in the upper uproar about the copied file. Shane is trying to convince them that it was nothing important that they need worry about. Just a childish prank. The file didn't mention them and couldn't in any way tie them personally to the operation. Paolo slides over to sit beside Hallam on the floor. Tweet, Paolo says. Tweet, tweet. Hallam answers back. I told you to stop that in here, Eunice snaps. It's silly. Tweet, tweet. Hallam raises his head and answers her. Leave those boys alone, David Shane said. They're not the problem. Our lack of guts is the problem. And what do you mean by that? Rabbi Geller says. Shane says, that we're talking about only one woman here, one single woman, and everything she does gets us quaking in our boots. She stumbled onto that file, that's all, and we can see that she'd never deciphered it. So what's the big deal? This is turning into a bad dream, Rabbi Geller says, and I want it over and done with. Isn't there some way we can just make her leave the island? Eunice asked. Let her go back to New York so she becomes someone else's problem? Running her out of town is not our job description, David Shane says. Our job is to watch her. But I guess while we're watching her, it won't be so bad if we nudge her a little. And how do we do that? Rabbi Geller asked. The boys never speak while in their meeting. They communicate with each other in bird talk or on their PDA monitors. Ricky writes the word noise on his PDA and shows it to Chi. Chi nods and Ricky takes the PDA to Paulo and Hallam. Tweet, Paulo says. Tweet, tweet, Ricky answers. Ricky takes the PDA to David Shane with the words noise underlines. Tweet, Ricky says. Will you make them stop doing that, Eunice says. It's driving me crazy. David Shane ignores her. Regardless of how eccentric they are, the boys had come down with the blessings of the NSA on their heads. Dick Simon was no fool. He wouldn't have sent them if they weren't the best at their job. The boys, we think, should initiate a noise campaign, David Shane says, and it's not a bad idea. A person lives on this end of the island if they want peace and quiet. We've taken away her peace by using cars and the drive-bys. Now we can take away her quiet. If anything would make her leave the island, that would. So we start honking horns and banging tin plates, Eunice says. That's going to go over really big with my other neighbors. What we do, David Shane says, is enhance her environment. Think about the car. She's the only one who's affected by the speeding cars because we tempered her first with the pickup truck speeding past her window. So we get closer by renting that old plantation house next to her and sensitizing her to other sounds. Lawnmowers, buzzing saws, hammer from construction, that sort of thing. It's worth a try. And in the meanwhile, we keep pushing up the surveillance, double it if need be. She knows about the surveillance. Good. Put yourself in her place. There's no peace when you leave home and no quiet when you're at home. Wouldn't you leave? Within 2 weeks, they determined the owner of the old plantation house, rent it under the cover of two bachelors from Chicago, and furnish it with tables and beds. It becomes the command center for the operation. Shane is satisfied with the setup. Second floor bedroom window looks directly across the Naylor property. It would be child's play to keep her under surveillance while she was on her porch or in the garden. But what worries him the most is that the boys included in the operation, it is actually child's play. None of this is serious business for them. He doesn't press down on them too hard because they came directly from Dick Simon and therefore believe they should answer only to him. It's nothing that they've said or done directly, but there is an unspoken consensus that they are Simon's boys and that they should be given pretty much a free hand. Boys are bored. There is little for them to do on this operation but clock the comings and goings of the Naylor woman. They have whole fact sheets for weeks of this type of observation. The time she left the house and the time she came back, the time she spent in her garden, the time she was on the porch reading, the time when she went to bed, and the time she got up. Hallam, who's responsible for hacking into her computer, has the most action. She's always emailing her friends in New York, talking on and on about the surveillance. They wish she would just shut the hell up about that and go on to something important. They're having their breakfast of Captain Crunch and orange juice when Ricky gets an idea. Tweet, Ricky says. Tweet, tweet, Paulo answers back. Let's play a game tonight, Ricky says. Let's play Poison the Target. What are the rules? Hallam asks. The rules are simple, Ricky says. We go under the house and pretend to poison the water line. First man in and out wins. Sounds good to me, Chi says. Tweet, 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 the others answer back. They dress in the dark clothes, and at 3 a.m., they creep out of the plantation house and quietly make their way towards the Naylor property. They use only bird talk as they circle the house, looking for the crawl space. Each boy carries a wrench and a night flashlight, a bag, and a bag of mud. Paulo finds the crawl space first and quickly slithers under the house. The others follow suit. It's not as easy to find the water lines, but when they do, they tap on it with the wrenches and smear it with mud. Tweet, tweet. The job is done. There is an edge of excitement in the fact that they might be caught as they each leave the crawl space and hurry back to the plantation house. You see, Ricky says, now she's dead. Ding dong, the witch is dead, Paula sings. No more boring days of watching her boring life. She's dead, dead, dead. Tweet, tweet, Hallam sings. Tweet, 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 the others join in. I had stopped sleeping soundly during the night. I would wake up in fits and starts. It wasn't because of the increasing heat. I liked warm nights and didn't even own an air conditioner. It was just general unrest. The surveillance was never off my mind. As I lay in the darkness wide awake, I heard them for the first time, the birds. The sounds carried well in the still of night. Tweet, tweet, tweet. There were no birds in that part of the island that sang at night, so I knew it had to be them, the people who were watching me. They had come onto my property and were circling the house. I got out of bed and went to the window, but I saw nothing in the pitch black. I went downstairs and cut on the lights on the screen porch, wishing that I had a dog that would have stopped this intrusion. I left the porch lights on and went back upstairs to bed. I didn't hear the birds any more as I lay awake until the first light of dawn. I was groggy the next morning as I sat on the sun porch, having my coffee and looking over the water. I could see the old plantation house very well. There were two cars parked in the yard. Obviously, people had moved in. When they came, I don't know. They had apparently made the move in the middle of the night. I wondered if I should be neighborly and go over and introduce myself, but there was something about this setup that didn't seem right, something foreboding. I made a mental note to myself to ask Betty if she knew who the new people were, since she made it her business to know everyone on that part of the island. Whoever the new people were, they were certainly noisy. I was out in my garden staking the tomatoes when a whole half day of hammering began. It sounded like they were building a new wing on the house. I went up to my study and tried to read, but that meant I had to endure the drive-bys. I told myself that I was going to follow the advice of friends and ignore the drive-bys by doing my reading on the front porch of the house. But it seemed that whenever I was near that porch, there was some new onslaught of noise to deal with. It seemed like they mowed that property every other day. When it wasn't the sound of mowing, there was some sort of chainsaw going. Going out for a peaceful drive was out of the question, because I had to deal with the cars zinging by in my ears and the blinking brake lights in front of me. Only went out when I absolutely had to. I was surrounded. Whenever I turned, they were there to manipulate my environment. Slowly, each day, they were closing in. The boys watched the Naylor woman as she exits her back door to go and weed her garden. It was no fun playing poison the target when she gets up the next day alive to taunt them. She isn't going She isn't keeping up her end of the game if she doesn't die. Tweet, Hallam says. What? Apollo answers. I know a game, Hallam says. Let's play Poison the Garden. How does it go? She asks. Well, Hallam says, we go out at night and each of us takes a section of the garden to kill. Whatever section dies first, the man is the winner. Sounds good, Ricky says. And we don't tell each other what type of poison we're going to use. Let's make it a real competition. And we leave nothing, Paulo says. Nothing that lets her know that someone has been in the garden. Not a stick move, not a footprint anywhere. It's 3 a.m. and they creep out into the night, just dressed in the dark clothes and each carrying a paper bag. They circle the house. Paulo throws a rock onto the roof nearest her bedroom window, but nothing stirs. Tweet, tweet, Hallam says, and they move towards the garden. The boys are so excited they can hardly contain themselves. A real mission at last. Paulo takes the section where the young tomato plants are flourishing. He digs a circle around one of the plants with his hands and opens his paper bag, which contains chemical fertilizer. He takes a huge handful and fills the hole. Then he puts the dirt back over the circle he has made. He can see shadows of the other boys moving slowly through the garden, and he tweets to tell them that it's time to go. Back in the house, they are in high spirits. The game has come off very well. They all slap each other's hand and high five. Did you see what Ricky did? She asked. It's so damn dark out there, you can hardly see your hand in front of your face, Hallam says. Well, Rick pissed on the zucchini, she says, and they all have a good laugh. Betty invited me over for a drink, and I asked her if she knew anything about the new people who had moved into the plantation house. She had very little to say except that they were supposed to be from Chicago. and they were two men. I went over, she said, but they weren't very friendly. As a matter of fact, they came right out and told me they had come down for peace and quiet and wanted to be left alone. They're probably gay, she continued, but somehow they didn't strike me as the type. There's no type for being gay, I told her. She conceded that she knew that, but if she were a betting woman, she would lay 5 on the fact that they were ex-military. Just something about them. They certainly kept up a lot of noise, I told her. She said she hadn't really noticed, but then again, the sounds would travel differently because of where their house sat. And I should remember that I was one of the few people on that part of the island who worked at home, so I'd probably hear more than anyone else. Then she asked me about my garden, and I invited her over to see. I was proud of the effort that had gone into that little patch of land. Walking her through it, I noticed one of my tomato plants had drooped, and the leaves were starting to curl up. I checked for bugs, but there were none on it. Poor thing looks like it's gone sick, she said. That'll happen sometimes. They just get a disease and wither up. I'd get rid of it if I were you. It might help to save the others. I promised myself to do that the next day, but when I went out to check, the plant had gone totally black as if someone had scorched it with fire. I also saw that my Brussels sprouts were beginning to wither. I dug up the tomato plant and all the Brussels sprouts. It was like losing a part of myself. I'd worked so hard on that garden. Boys in the Garden is a big success for the boys, but it's one they dare not repeat. Let her think that it happened naturally, so they have a secret that she won't uncover. It's important that David Shane doesn't know as well, and if she was all over the phone or emailing her friends talking about someone killing the garden, he'd find out. It would be in the reports. No, they'd had their fun, and now it was back to the boring, the mind-numbing details of her nothing of a life. Her having discovered that file was still a sore point for them. It had happened before their watch, but it was a matter of honor for them to punish her in some way for doing it. Have a great game we can play, Paulo says. A magnificent one. Tweet, Ricky says. But you haven't even heard it yet, Paulo answers back. Tweet, tweet, Ricky says. Well, fuck you too, Paulo answers. Come on, guys. Let's not fight, she says. What's your idea, Paulo? The witch stole our file, right? So we play steal her laptop. She carries the laptop with her everywhere she goes, Hallam says. Do we hire someone to mug her? She asks. No, Paulo says. It's even better than that. We use one of her friends to help us get it. She won't even see it coming. When they first hacked into the Naylor woman's computer, they copied her electronic Rolodex file. They were privy to all of her friends and contacts, amongst the 500 or so names. They had pulled up 6 who were known to the agency as informants or operatives. Of these, the only one she had called while on the island was C.J. Hudson. She had gone into her usual dumbass tirade about the surveillance and how unhappy she was. They would bring him down to the island to help him out. To help them out. Well, we'll need David on this one, Hallam says. Leave David to me, Paulo said. We'll get what we want. CJ Hudson is having a good semester. For him, every semester becomes a good one as it's ending. He has taught 4 classes this year, so there's a pile of history exams to mark. It amazes him how much time will have to go into correcting simple things like grammar and syntax. For Princeton students, no less. He's sorting the blue exam books into piles, trying to decide which stack to take home first. Small statured black man, his dark fingers work swiftly as the piles continue to grow. He's been teaching history at Princeton for almost 20 years, and in only 2 of those did the university deem it fit to give him a graduate assistant. Each year he fought for it, though, but to no avail. CJ likes to think of himself as a fighter, a crusader for his rights and the rights of the Black academic community. He uses his scholarship at his sword, penning numerous books and papers about Black self-determination. He's known among his colleagues as an upfront type of guy, a firebrand that doesn't mind bucking the authorities. There are two things, however, that his colleagues don't know about him. He's gay, and he's an informant for the National Security Agency. He was first recruited for the agency while in college during the 1960s. He brought them information about the activities of several Black student organizations, which they would share with the FBI. He chaired some of these groups, and in others was considered a valuable asset. In all of them, he would have been the last person thought of as an informant. He did it for the money. He told himself if he didn't, someone else would. After he graduated and started teaching at various universities, he wanted to leave that part of his past behind. But he found out it wasn't so easy. Once an informant, you stay an informant. The agency had called on him from time to time while he was at Princeton. He helped them to keep an eye on Black student activities and organizations. Now they were calling again. Two of them rang his bell just after dinner to send him on one of his toughest assignments to date. He had to betray a friend. "Can't you get someone else to go?" he asked. "No," the two agents told him. "It has to be you, and it has to be now." "I have papers to grade," he said. "Grade them in St. Helena," they told him. "We want you on that plane by the end of the week. I don't think we have to tell you how much you owe us." No, they didn't have to tell him. He knew. A few years back, when he was arrested on a morals charge involving a teenaged male prostitute, it took one call and he was out of jail with all of the paperwork mysteriously disappearing. That's what these people could do, make you disappear. Everything you've worked for, everything you've built over the years, gone in the blink of an eye. CJ was not a courageous man. If he has to balance his life against a friendship, his life wins. When CJ gets off the plane in Savannah, Gloria is there to meet him, and she's so happy to see him that it breaks his heart. "You were worried about me, weren't you?" she asked. "I was worried," he says, "but I also wanted a little vacation as well. I can't wait to see this house of yours." The drive from Savannah to St. Helena is a pleasant one. She chatters on about the places she's gone to show him and the restaurants they can visit. But the best restaurant of all is at her house. "You'll be eating straight from the garden," she told him, "and we can put out our crab cages right from my property." CJ generally likes Gloria Naylor. He has proven to be a true friend over the 10 years he's known her. When his mother was sick a few years back and was in danger of losing her house, Gloria loaned him $5,000 to help satisfy the mortgage. He'd paid her back every penny, but she was the only one out of his friends to step forward and offer to help without being asked. And she never mentioned it, never brought it up. Some people want to remind you of your debts to them, but not Gloria. "I was glad I had it to help," was all she ever said on the matter. He asked himself for the 100th time how he could bring himself to do what they wanted, turn over her computer, and he answers himself for the 100th time that he is really bringing no harm to anyone. They just want to look at it, that's all. She can't win this war she's engaged in. She has no idea of the forces and resources that are weighed against her. If you can't win, why fight? He knows the answer for himself, and he knows the answer for her. She would fight just for the principle of it all. CJ dutifully follows Gloria around her garden as she proudly shows him as its progress. It had some sort of disease at first, she said, but it bounced back. Personally, he'd be bored with this lifestyle, living on an island, growing tomatoes and spinach. Her face lights up as she shows him where the cantaloupes and watermelons will come in. He has to admit that the vegetables from her garden are certainly delicious. She puts out quite a spread for him: barbecue chicken, mashed potatoes, sugar snap peas. He has brought 2 bottles of wine, and they share one while sitting on her screened porch after dinner. "Tomorrow I will show you the rest of the island," she says. You'll love Penn Center. It was a school for the first freed slaves after the Civil War, and they say it's where Martin Luther King planned the March on Washington back in the 60s. Sounds great to me, but I also have to spend time grading exam books I brought down. That night, after he's sure that Gloria is sleeping, he slips downstairs to make a call to the number that he has been given. He turns on the television so that the voice will be disguised in case she happens to wake up. He has little to say, though. His job is to listen. There's a street festival on Savannah waterfront, he's told. He's to be there by noon the next day for further instructions. CJ hangs up the phone and slips quietly upstairs to his room. At breakfast the next morning, he tells Gloria that he'd love to see the Savannah waterfront. Was it possible they could go? She agrees readily. Savannah is one of her favorite cities, and she loves the renovations they've done at the waterfront. I want you to know something, she says. We're going to be followed. CJ's heart starts racing, and he looks at her startled. They follow me wherever I go, she continues. But for today, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to try and have some fun with a friend. That's the best thing, he tells her. The Savannah waterfront is crowded with tourists and locals. An array of restaurants, gift shops, and novelty stores are packed into a half-mile stretch of shoreline. It is especially crowded today because of the street fair. Local artists representing practically every town in the Low Country are displaying their creations. Gloria is an avid collector of t-shirts, so they stop in a large store that sells them. As they look around at the store, CJ breaks off from Gloria. A woman pushing a baby carriage whispers in his ear as she passes, "Go outside," and then she moves to another part of the store. CJ finds Gloria and tells her that he's going to go outside for a minute. Would she be long? Not much longer, she tells him. CJ goes outside and Paolo is there waiting. Does she have the computer, he asks. I'm not sure, CJ replies. She has a large red bag besides her pocketbook. Maybe it's still there. Find out, Paolo tells him. Remember, we're watching. Now buy something before you go back in. Paolo melts to the crowd. CJ buys a packet of note cards from the nearest vendor and returns to the store. I'm ready, Gloria tells him. Good, he says. Let's go get a drink. Gloria takes him to one of her favorite places, a lounge on the second floor of the Holiday Inn. It's not a terribly crowded and it overlooks the water. They take a table by the window and order 2 wine spritzers, sitting for a moment in silence and enjoying a view of the water as the boats go by. So what do you think I should do? She asks. About? The surveillance, CJ. And they hacked into my computer and have all my files. CJ heaves a deep sigh. Maybe it'll go away, Gloria. In time. For now, just for today, let's try to forget about it. Okay, so I'm leaving off page 70 was the last page I read, so we'll pick back up the next time. Bye guys, see you next time.